Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to our session here. We are excited to have you joining us in SkillsFuture Month at SIT. I'm Xiuhui, an undergraduate student from SIT, and I will be your student host for this session. The title of this session is Let's Talk Community and Social Services. We are honored to have our speaker from NTU, Mr. Bernard McKenzie, who will be speaking to us today. Mr. Bernard McKenzie is a trained psychotherapist equipped with professional counseling awarded by Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. His career has journeyed through social, public, and civil services in the last 20 years. During his work, he has rendered professional assistance ranging from young children to mature adults. Without further ado, let us welcome our speaker, Mr. Bernard McKenzie.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Glad to meet all of you in this afternoon. All right, and again, a very quick apology to having a very English slash Scottish sounding name like Bernard Mackenzie. Most people would have assumed that it's going to be a Scottish person, but no, I'm not. It's just that I have a very English sounding name. Yeah, this is something that's been going on since I've been to school. Teachers always they just assume that it's going to be a Scottish or an English kid who's going to be in school. And in fact, one of couple of my places that I worked, my colleagues before when they met me, they thought, oh, this is going to be a white person, from Scotland. Yeah, but no, it isn't. I'm very much Singaporean, like most of you. Grew up with the same more or less the same education system. Yeah, and I've been in the social services, or rather in the counseling practice, for slightly more than 20 years, right? So, and I'm really honored to be to be called here to share with y'all a little bit about my journey and what is social services, especially in a community setting. What does it even mean, right? Um, I started off my career as a counselor slash social worker in a community setting where I started working with people, or rather children who were physically disabled, but they were studying in mainstream school. I mean, that's how I first started. But before even we go into talking about what is social services and community, I think we need to take a little bit of time to even find out. So, what is that myths that's around social services? I think you could take a little bit of your time to just take maybe a half a second or a minute or so to think, hey, what are some of the myths that I've heard of? Some of the myths that you probably would have heard of. These are just some of it. This is just like tip of the iceberg, where some of the myths are believed that all staff members in social services are known as social workers. So allow me to tell you that these are all myths. Yeah, these are not the actual stuff, right? The other thing that I've ever heard is that, oh, individuals who work in social services are just blessed with a very kind heart. Therefore, short of a better word to put it, they could be all volunteers, and so therefore we have no salary or things of sorts. I remember when I went into the practice in year 2000, and my prospective father-in-law, now father-in-law, back then prospective father-in-law, he said, "Hey, the field that you're going to, do you get paid?" I mean, of course, being a prospective father-in-law, he was more worried about his daughter. I mean, which is fair enough, right? And then he said, "Hey, does he get paid, or is it part of this volunteer work that you are doing?" Yeah, so I actually it took me about a good half an hour to 45 minutes to explain to him what is social services, we get paid, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's one of the misconception, or rather the myths of staff members who work in the social services, right? The other thing that I've heard with social workers or counselors or any one of us who work in the social service sector, hey, these people are miracle workers. You can just go and tell them your problem, and they will tell you a solution, and they will have an answer for all the problems. The other myth that I've not included in here, somebody once come and shared with me and said that, hey, you're working in the social service sector and you are trained in the area of psychology, counseling, or in social work and whatnot, uh, which means you could read my mind. And I kind of candidly told this friend of mine, I said, well, I can't even read my mind and most times, let alone me reading your mind. Yeah, so these are some of the myths that's generally being discussed about in the social services. But again, allow me to tell you that this is just purely um, tip of the iceberg. Yeah, it's not exhaustive. Okay, so but what is social services in the community setting, right? I think that's the question that we are here to probably discuss about or think about. Short of a better word to put it, right? So social services, the primary aim of a social services in a community setting. Today, if you go into National Council of Social Service (NCSS), if you go into the website, you could technically click on and find out that there's quite a number of social services out there playing different roles for different population. Right? There are some organizations that work with mainly with children. There's some purely working with elderly, and then of course, some of you may have heard of this term called FSC, Family Service Centers, which generally work with more with children, families, couples, and and they are plentiful. I would be as I say this, I say it with a lot of pride. I think we are blessed, especially in Singapore. We are blessed to have almost right. For every one individual who needs help, there's at least three organizations out there which could render support. So yeah, I this is my again my a very strong belief that I have, and it's my personal opinion that Singapore is such a we are so blessed that we have many organizations to cater to the needs of people from different population and different needs. Right. So social services general aim is to enhance human quality of resources. So which means, for an example, if a child is not comes from a disadvantaged background and it needs that support, let it be academic support, let it be to be integrated for whatever the reason it may be. Yes, that's where some of the social services come in. For an example, when I was working in the sector with children with physical disability, and they were studying in a mainstream school, yes, my role as a worker over there is to help these children to be integrated in their own school setting, in terms of forming relationship, as in like friendships. So a lot of my work is not only rendering counseling support for them, but it's also very much working with the school and see what other resources could go in, right? Social services is a service that's rendered to any person on the basis of desire to serve, which is inspired by the feeling of helping others. So generally, yes, again, like the slide going out, right? They're all kind-hearted. Actually, I won't completely say it's a myth in that aspect, because most of us come in. Of course, it does. Of course, we have a salary and it pays our bills. That I have to say, it took care of it's been taking care of my family. But at the same time, somehow you naturally see people who are generally have uh, this drive to help others, right? To help a particular population and things of sort. So yeah, so generally it's served by the inspiration, by uh, driven by the feeling of helping others, right? And yes, social services range from public service. Most of it is to serve the public. Works with either particular groups, which is commonly more disadvantaged. It could be a child who's coming from lower SES. It could be a couple who's going through some marital issues. Therefore, they are seeking for counseling support, or it could be some of the which we may have seen, like some of the elderly services or the elderly daycare centers. We are a growing population, so yeah, so therefore, you may have noticed that some of these elderly daycares are actually under our HDB flats, right? So again, I would say that as our nation is growing, I mean, it's soon going to be our 56th birthday. As we are growing, the truth is more needs will be coming in, right? In fact, I think I was just talking to one of my student earlier, and I was sharing with her that now mental health is on the spotlight, right? Because there's a lot of issues pertaining to youths and mental health. So there are organizations, for an example, if I could very candidly say, like Touch. If you have heard of Touch Community Services, they do quite a bit of work with youth, especially in the area of internet addiction or gaming addiction and things as well. So the needs for social services in the community setting will keep growing. And then in this current pandemic, yeah, it opens up more doors for more people to come in, right, with more expertise, short of a better word to put it. All right, right. But what is social services? There are many, even though we call it in Singapore social services, but the term is pretty uh, replaceable, right? In some other country, we call it social welfare. And I've heard some of my friends or my counterparts who practice in US, they call it the social welfare, right? I also hear even in Singapore, like my mom is like she's 80 this year, and she uses this term. She don't call it social services. Oh, this is for social welfare, right? So she uses the term. So those terms are very interchangeable, at least in our context. Social welfare, social protection, social assistance, social care, right? But the truth is, it I mean, whatever the term may be, the purpose, it's more or less the same, right? It generally centralizes around many areas, like what I said, but it generally focuses on education, healthcare, in for example, housing matters as well. For an example, when I used to when I used to work with the social services, I remember writing into letters to our HDB and saying, could we support this person with rental house, rental flat and things of sort. But the main focus of social services, it's not only enhance an individual's life, but also to empower, to create a platform for empowerment that will allow the person to achieve his or her fullest potential. And in Singapore, in social service context, the social service sector actually employs more than 15,000 people, ranging from social workers, therapists. Okay, when I say therapists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, counselors, psychologists, nursing staff, assistant nursing aide, social work aide, special need teachers, early childhood, early intervention education teachers. The range actually goes on, right? In fact, I'm so happy to say that whatever the role that I've just mentioned or whatever I've put in the slide is short of a better word. Again, to me, is just tip of the iceberg. It will continue to evolve, and it will even evolve to the to overcome this new norm that we are discussing about, right? Right. Uh, for an example, in the disability sector, the reason I use the disability sector for an example because I come from the disability sector. I first started off there. Our Ministry of Education estimates that about 2.1 of the student population of approximately 460 students has a disability, right? It could be a physical disability, it could be a learning difficulty, it could be a hearing, visual, sensory disability, it could be anything. So that number is always there. Person with disability in the workforce, this is in 2016, we are talking about 0.55, right? Of course, I have not included the aging population who are in the workforce as well, right? We do have elderly and they do have medical needs, right? Like example, even like I said, like my mom, I used my mom as an example, who's 80 years old, but she needs a lot of care because she needs support from a physiotherapist every on a weekly session. Because my mom had a stroke about, if I'm not mistaken, about maybe 10 years ago. I mean, right? So she still she even I reach when we reach out to social services support for the fact that my mother needs support from a physiotherapist, right? And of course, children with developmental needs. Even though the number is 4,000 in 2015, you and I know that the more awareness that we have right now, these numbers are going to go up. It's not exhaustive, right? Okay, close to 10,000 students with special needs in school, uh, and some of them can't even access teaching material. So, for an example, I'm going to use SPD. If you guys have heard of SPD, SPD has this assistive technological unit that actually supports children with physical disability. Um, or special needs to be integrated in school where they can have access to teaching materials and assessments, right? And of course, like I said, in elderly population, we are a graying nation in that way, right? Our population is graying. Yeah, give it another 20, 30 years from now, be I'll be 60 and above, right? So, and with old age, some of them may have disability, like my mom, right? The reason I'm using SPD and the disability sector, I'll share with you more where I'm coming from, right? So I'll share with you a little bit of my journey as well, right? This information, it's probably not new for some of us. Even if you Google it, I could bet my last dollar we will be able to find it, right? But I think what's most important is this portion that I wanted to share with all of us as we are exploring this idea of, hey, social services, is this the area that I should be thinking about, or is this an area that I think I would like to explore, right? I'm just here to share a little bit about my journey with social services, right? My very first career was never in the social services, right? Uh, I started off as a regular uh, with the SAF, Singapore Armed Forces. I was a regular with the SAF Commandos, right? So I spent about 6 years of my in a way, one of my best time was with the unit, right? So eventually, when I decided to say, okay, no, I wanted to come out, right? I wanted to leave the service, and I said, okay, I wanted to be do something that to me was more meaningful. And of course, that was also came in line when I finished my studies in psychology. And I remember when I came back and I wanted to do the going into the community setting. I remember some of my they were my commanders, and of course they were my close friends as well. Uh, were we meeting up in the mess and sitting down? Okay, for those of you who serve national service, national service, or if you've been ex regular, or if you know anybody, you've heard this term called the mess. When we sat down and we were talking, like this place to chill out, yeah. And when we were talking, I remember one of my friends who was a captain back then. He said, "Hey, bro, with all due respect, allow me to ask you, whatever you went and you studied for, and then now you're planning to leave the service, will it even feed you?" That was his first question. And I remember thinking to myself that, hey, that's a very good question. That will it forget about paying bills? Will it even feed me? And then I told myself, yeah, you know what? I don't know whether will it feed me. I don't know whether it'll pay my bills, but hey, guess what? But I'm just going to venture into that. So of course, then I started, and then when I first started, and I went into the uh, social service sector. Honestly, it was definitely a very new thing for me. For somebody who's been in the service for the in the way 6 years or 6 years plus, I was pretty used to that, right? It was very, in a way, regimental to the certain extent, just do what needs to be done, and things move on. And especially being in a unit like SAF commandos, um most of us would be like, we're extremely highly motivated guys, just very competitive, trying to move on. And when I came into the social service sector, it was very different for me, and I was like, oh my god, what got into me that I said I wanted to come into here, right? Come into this place. It's so different. It took me some time to adapt to the way how things was working. Subsequently, I moved on into I was in the disability sector. I was close to about 5.5 years. Then I moved on when Ministry of Education (MOE) back then came up with this concept of school counselors, and then I crossed over to be a school counselor. Right, so I was in two different schools. One was a purely a primary school, and the other was specialized school. So if you guys have heard of this particular school called Assumption Pathway School, which is at Cashew Road, I was there and I was working with students who were identified to be at-risk youths, right? Because they failed PSLE and they are there. High risk, I won't say high risk behavior, but high risk uh, behavior tendencies, right? And had a lot of opportunities to work with them and work with their families. And of course, subsequently, I also moved on to do some level of work with career counseling. And then now I'm with NIE where I do a bit of teaching and I'm still doing my therapy work. But the truth of the matter is, even though a lot of my friends will say, oh, we have known you even within my counseling fraternity. My friends will say, hey, you're the only guy we know that you don't stay in one place too long. You move every 3 4 years. You do move somewhere. 6 years max, you move somewhere else. I said, you're absolutely right. I leave the organization because I gravitate towards what I want to learn next. But I don't leave the fraternity. And my wife and my two daughters, my kids, jokingly, I don't think they're joking. I think there's a lot of truth to whatever they say. They'll be like, oh, dad would not retire, because dad is having so much fun in whatever role that he's doing that he doesn't retire. I think to me, even though commandos was was home, and social services or counseling is my second home, right? I mean that's how my journey has been, right? But allow me to also challenge you a little bit more and get you to think how um, how can we get into the social service sector? So when I was thinking about how can we get into not only social service but any sector, any new sector, and reflecting on my own journey, I kind of drafted out this model, which I call it the W2H2 model. The first question that I asked myself when I wanted to come into social service sector, remember I was telling you about my friend who said that, hey, will it pay your bills or will it even feed you, right? Right. When I wanted to come into the social service sector, I asked myself, hey, what's my motivation to get there? Or short of a better word to put it, what's the pull factor? And to me, at that point in time, my pull factor was I wanted to practice the skills that I've learned, right? I wanted to do that, and I thought that, hey, you know what? Maybe my life journey um, could add value to somebody else's life. So let me explore that, right? Of course, prior to coming into the field, I did some volunteer work, which helped me to understand the possible way of how the social service will work. So I asked myself this first question: what's my motivation or my pull factor? Then I went on to ask the second question: how do I plan to achieve this goal? Or in this case, I put your goal, right? How do I plan to achieve it? So was it in the training? Was it into getting to know people in that field? Yes, these are some of the things that I did. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, I started volunteering. This was I was still in service, and I was planning to cross over to the social service sector. I told myself, let me volunteer for a couple of years and see how it fits in. If it doesn't fit in, okay, I'll just remain in unit, right? So I went on to volunteer with Boys Town, and I enjoyed it working with the kids. I really enjoyed it with the kids. Spent a lot of time with the organization to understand how they operate, right? So that was the learning curve that I gave for myself. Was it steep? Yes, it was, and I just hang on with that. My third question that I asked myself is that what are the barriers that's in the way for me? There are definitely certain barriers in terms of understanding the culture of the social service sector, understanding the population that you are working with. Even though I work with youth, but my very first organization was to work with children with physical disability. What are my barriers? So where do I need to go and learn? And who do I need to speak to? So I identified what are the barriers for me. And of course, at that point in time, I'm also thinking about marriage, and I need to think about barriers. Oh my God, will he be able to pay bills? We will pay bills. Okay, fine. These were some real barriers. I mean, these are the real stuff, right? Okay. Then, last but not least, then I asked myself, how do I plan to overcome these barriers? And one of my barrier was definitely okay, in this case, I won't call him a barrier, was my prospective father-in-law. he said that will it pay bills? So I need to convince him as well that, hey, guess what? Your future son-in-law is going into social services. His pay is not too bad, and he will still take care of the family, right? So these are the questions that I asked to myself as I was crossing over, right? So these are some things that you may want to think about, right? Again, it's not cast in stone. It's different strokes for different folks, for you to really think about, as you are thinking about crossing over to the social services, or even having an idea, right? This is one of my personal favorite saying, my personal favorite saying, right? It was said by Emerson. It is one of the most beautiful compensation of life that no man can sincerely try to help another without helping himself. Right. The reason I'm quoting Emerson over here is because in this 20 over years of working with different population, meeting different group of people, uh, and discussing about their issues, their concerns, and seeing how we could support them and everything. To be very honest, in that 20 years, I think I benefited most compared to any of my clients that I worked with. That's why even now, when some of my clients said, "Oh, thank you so much for exploring and you helped me," I always tell them that no, I hardly did anything. My role was just to facilitate certain things. It was I benefited the most because I get to learn from them a lot. I get to learn about their lifestyle, and 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 uh, Carl Jung, of course, if you guys read psychology, you guys will know that Freud was Carl Jung's teacher, right? So Carl Jung, in fact, said that most people who come into the social service sectors are all wounded healers, and I completely agree with him in that because I had hardship in my own life and my own difficulty, and I'm working with, let it be with the children that I worked with the adults that I worked with, even with the elderly that I have worked with, the families that I worked with. I think I get to heal a lot more with my own pain and things of sorts in that process of making a difference for them, right? So if you ask me, social services in community, it's really wonderful. Okay, to me, it's really wonderful. Maybe once my kids are a bit grown up, and then maybe I don't need to pay so much of their bills, especially their university bills and university fees and their tuition fees and whatnot. Yeah, probably I will. I've always told this to my friends. I say, yeah, I will come back to the social services because I enjoy doing that role. I enjoy uh, being uh, making a difference. Where in that process they make a difference for me, and so this is me. This is one of the races that I run. So I run quite a bit. So I put this slide over here. My journey continues in this field. Like if you ask me, like I said, my wife and my kids always tease me and say that, hey, dad will never retire, and I have to completely agree with them because my journey will continue as long as I can, as long as my mind is functioning, physically I'm functioning, my journey will continue. So, like I said, even though it was supposed to be talking about social services and community, yes, we talked about it a little, but it's a lot more about having that, not only having that desire to come in to help others, but enjoying that process of helping others at the same time helping ourselves, right? So my journey continues. I hope to see some of you along in the journey. Yeah, I mean that's how it has been for me, and I hope to see some of you coming on board as well, right? With that said, maybe now we could open up for some Q and A's. I'll take away the slide. Yeah, so maybe we could go back to taking away. Yeah, I will. I think I can stop sharing.
Currently in the live Q&A, there are three questions. So the
Oh,
first
okay.
question was, do you need to have a more optimistic personality to work in social services, and does it make you more cynical over time?
Okay, I won't say you need to be optimistic, because optimistic means the possibility of what do you call it, feeling cynical or feeling rejected is even higher. So you don't have to be optimistic, but probably we need to look at things, like what Carl Rogers call it, have the unconditional positive regard. So no matter how things happen, right, always take it upon that, okay, things are happening for a good reason, right? So I mean, to me, I won't call it being optimistic, but I, at the same time, not being pessimistic. But I think it's just being saying that it's a process, and believe that and trust in the process, that things are happening for a good reason. Yeah, I mean, that's for me. That's for me. Will it turn you to be cynical? It may. I have to agree with that. It may. So that's why, I mean, if you're coming into the field, whoever this is may coming into the field, it's very important to have a clinical supervisor, right? Who you can spar your ideas and talk about it, to help you, to guide you. Because, okay, again, a very personal sharing. When I first came onto the field, um, generally I tend to take it up a lot of things upon myself, right? So I used to feel very bad when I don't see my clients improving, or I used to say that, oh, maybe it's my fault, I'm not doing enough. So that kind, we can fall into that trap. So it's very important to be under the guidance of a clinical supervisor or a mentor in that way, for me, to help me to balance out things. Yeah.
All right,
and,
moving
and
on. There are more
Mhm.
questions coming up. So there's this question
Okay.
that asks, will having basic counseling skills be an essential skill set for anyone wanting to work in community and social workers?
Okay, I think it's a good skill to keep under your belt, right? Even you, okay, for an example, right? This person may not be even okay. Let's say this person is probably in the admin department in an FSC, right? For an example, but it's good to have it under your belt, or keep it with you, because you will never know when it could be used. For an example, my admin colleague here in NIE, she's also trained in counseling. So she went for a short diploma course in counseling. So if, let's say, I am not around, I'm in a meeting or I'm in another session, and somebody walks in, she is able to render that support for a while. So it is, if somebody wants to pursue in the field of being a counselor or even a social worker, I would say yes, go for that training. So it's good to keep. But for somebody who says that, you know what, I don't want to be a counselor, but do you think I should go and keep it? Yeah, I would say go for it. Why? Because to me, counseling is almost like a life skill. It works across industries. So have it.
So Bernard, do you have any advices to people who are looking for career switch into the social services sector?
Okay, if you ask me for one advice, before jumping into it, depending on whichever industry you're coming from, but before jumping into it, at least go and do some level of volunteer work. Okay, this is for two reasons that I'm saying that. One reason is, then we know what are the nuances of the sector. Every sector has its nuances, so we will have a better understanding of the nuances. That's number one. Number two, when you're coming to write your resume, if you're writing your resume, you're drafting up your, yeah, especially your resume, you can at least put in there and say that, hey, you know what, I've done some volunteer work. In that way, if any prospective employer, especially in the social service sector, is looking at it, he or she will say that, hey, this person has some transferable skills, know how it works. The transferable skills is a lot more relatable in that way. Yeah, so it's a two-way to look at it. Number one, to understand the nuances. Number two, when you're writing your resume, you have more things to write. If not, prospective employees will say, hey, no, but this person, I'm not sure whether there's a match. If you've done some volunteer work, at least we could talk about it in the interview, if should they call us for an interview. Yeah, that will be my one golden advice to anybody.
Next, based on your experience as a counselor, what is your
Mhm.
biggest challenge or struggle?
Okay, my biggest challenge and my struggle. Okay, thank you for the question. Whoever asked that, that's a brilliant question. My biggest challenge was when I first started. Right, when I first started, somehow, uh, most counselors fall into this trap that we all end up feeling that like we need to save every client, right? So we're like, oh, no, I'm going to go 100%. And there's always this thing that, oh, my client is not improving and you're not getting the best of things. It's my fault. We start blaming ourselves. So I fell into that trap as well, and literally taking, short of a better word to put it, taking over their problem. No, one of my friends say, "Yeah, you're just taking over their monkey and put it on your shoulder." Yeah, so that will be one of the biggest challenge that we need to remind ourselves that, hey, you know what? It's their concerns. Our role is to facilitate. If they are not ready to move, then we will just wait, right? So that's one of the biggest challenge. So if you ask me how I worked around that was purely coming up with this little line that I've written in my office. You know what? My role is just to facilitate change and promote growth. If the client is not ready to move, I'm here to stay with them until they are ready for it. Right? Again, for those of you who are movie buffs, go and watch this movie called Goodwill Hunting, right? Especially those of you who are thinking about how is counseling work, go and watch Goodwill Hunting. Of course, it's Hollywood, but other than that, go and watch it. It's one of the most recommended movies to watch for counseling.
Next up, we have a question from Chow Mei Ling. This
Hmm.
person asks, where can a mid-career person start in social work without any qualification or skill in social work?
Okay, a mid-career person starting in social work, or
Without any qualification or skill.
okay, if it's a mid-career individual, if you're trying to cross over as into social work without any qualifications, it can be a little challenging. But with that said, right, I think today, the excuse me, with WSG, we have quite a number of programs like professional conversion program. We have the PCP program. We have a PCP program for social work as well. So you may want to check that, because I've known of people who may not have any form of qualification, but they get through to the social workers role, or rather the social worker training first. There's no way we could get into the social workers role without any form of training. It's like almost like uh, telling our car mechanic to say, hey, I need a heart surgery, can you do it? We will never do that, right? We will never go to a car mechanic and ask him for a heart surgery. Same thing. So without training, we cannot land in the social worker's job, or the role, short of a better word to put it. But if you are keen to go, you may want to explore WSG's website and look through the PCP program, and then from there go for the training, right? And then get emplaced in the organization as a social worker, right? Yeah, but we need to start off somewhere. If let's say you're saying that, oh, Benz, I'm not considering going to the PCP program, then you may want to look at the bachelor's in social work. Yeah, bachelor's in social work, that if I'm not mistaken is offered by SUSS, and if I'm not mistaken, they also have a grad dip, if I'm not mistaken. So you may want to check these two training programs, because without the training, it's very challenging to land on something. Yeah.
We have an audience who have concerns and she want to share with you. So
Oh, sure.
this audience is a fresh grad from one of the allied course from SIT and do not have any plans of continuing it. However, from
Mhm.
the course, they realize that their interest in social services sector. So how should they go about it?
Okay. Just wondering, she what training did this person do?
This from allied course.
Allied course. Oh, okay. Okay. What does okay? I'm sorry, but could the person share with us what does a allied course even means? Because that will be then it will be easier to discuss. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Moving on then. There's also a question on asking how can we boost our application to get into social sector, because this person
Okay.
has been trying a while with no social service education background, but only with years of volunteering experiences.
Okay. So, okay, if somebody has years of experience in volunteering, but however, there's no training, then you may want to, there's two ways to look at it. Okay. Number one, we could probably have to rework with the, what do you call it, the resume. Okay. Possibility could be the resume is not sending that message across. For an example, if let's say I've done some training in counseling, for an example, and then I'm applying for a counselor's job, and I've only done some volunteering, but I've never described about it in my resume. It'll be quite difficult for the prospective employer to look at it, right? Friend, allow me to just share with you. I think one of the most important thing when you're looking at is that yes, you've done a lot of volunteer work, but it's very important to describe what do you do in your volunteer work, and also allow me to share with you. It'd be very important to go and have some level of training to help you to boost your application, right? So you need to have that, because the volunteer work will support, but you have a bit of training, it boosts the application process. Yeah. You may want to look at that.
Following, we have Mr. Elvin Go, who asks, how do you know this is your calling and what motivates you in pursuing this path?
Okay. How did I know this is my calling? Alvin, with all due respect, my guess is going to be as good as yours. That's the truth. It's just that when I left when I joined, when I was in service, and after when I was planning to leave the organization, the SAF, I actually asked myself what was my motivation, and I told myself one of the things that told me was, you know what, I wanted to leave now because I wanted to establish myself in this field. So I left. And what keeps me motivated, short of a better word to put it, um, of course, it pays my bills. So I would say that yes. Does it make me a multi-billionaire? No, it doesn't make me a multi-billionaire, but it's enough to help me pay my bills and take care of my family. So it's okay. What motivates me, short of a better word, is just that to know that I've added value to somebody else's life. I know it may come across as super cliche, but if you ask me what's my motivation, that's my motivation. So my motivation when I first started was I felt good when I see that improvement that my clients were showing, that they were better in their functioning. That was my reward. And after that, when I the and as I progressed in the field, the next thing that motivated me was when I started teaching the next generation. Now I'm in that process of having that both, so I do a bit of therapy work, some level of therapy work. I enjoy that flavor, and I also enjoy that flavor of teaching. So what keeps me going is this. And the beautiful part about being in the social services, let it be counselor, let it be social worker, psychologist, whatever, right? The beautiful part is that it's a practicing field. So there's never a day that I can go saying that, hey, I never learned something new today. So that's what keeps me going. Thanks, Alvin, for the question.
Next, there's this audience who asks that they have a degree in marketing, and how should they
Hmm.
take up and should they take up masters in social work in order to get a job in social sector?
Okay, it's good that you have a degree in marketing. I'm just not very sure whether a master's in social work would be um, how we are going to get in there, because normally when you're doing a degree and then you're going to go to a master's, especially when it comes to social work, there's some level of continuity whatever you learn. So you need to build a base first before, you need to build a foundation first before building the next level of the building. So in that way you may have a bit of struggle. So I would say, my friend, instead of looking at a master's immediately, you may want to start off with a post-grad dip first, because the post-grad dip will give you that foundation, and then from there, when you're going to do your masters, in terms of the transfer of knowledge, or the or the building up of the knowledge will be a lot more well packed in. Rather than doing marketing and you're crossing over, it can be quite a bit of challenge. I mean, this is not only for social work. When I was doing psychology, then when I crossed over to do a master's in counseling, and I had friends who are coming from marketing and whatnot. Generally, when we were doing the masters, I could observe a little bit of their struggle because the foundation was not there. So at a master's level, the demand was higher. They struggled a bit. I'm not saying that they can't do it. It's just that they struggle a little bit more than us. That's all, right? So if in order to do that, especially in social work, you may want to go with a grad dip first, build that base before going into a master's.
We have Catherine who asks, would social work be a challenge or struggle for a person who tend to empathize with the case?
Uh, okay, I can't say it is a struggle because the foundation of social work, counseling, and psychology is empathy, right? Because without empathy, nothing else works. I always tease my students, especially when they're doing therapy sessions and I'm observing. I was like, it sounds like that if there's no empathy, then we just become technicians, which anybody can do. I just give a checklist and you tick, 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 the problem solved. It's not like that. So empathy is the foundation, but I think can I think the it's not about empathy, but I think if we start sympathizing, because empathy and sympathy is a very thin line. So I think we need to be very mindful that I can empathize you, but if I start sympathizing and taking over your problem, then it becomes a problem. So I won't say empathy is a problem, but again, Catherine, my 2 cents worth for you would be when you're coming into the field. Identify a good clinical supervisor or a mentor to guide you, because the we all fall into that trap, especially when we are not being taken care of or no proper scaffolding, right? So good have a good mentor to guide you, especially somebody who's been in the field for the longest of time, right? So this person, he or she, will be able to guide you in your journey.
There was a follow-up from the fresh grad question, who was from the
Hmm.
allied course from
Hmm.
SIT. This fresh grad was from occupational therapy.
Okay, okay. All right. So she was from occupational therapy and then she wants to cross over into social work.
Into the social service sector because they realized their interest in it. So how
Okay,
should we go
okay,
about it?
okay. Actually, since you're an occupational therapist, my friend, I think your bar is a bit lower compared to most of us, right? I mean, I take that as I say. I mean, I'm willing to say that, or like I said, I'm confident in saying that because your skill set is more or less something that social services like places like SPD, AWA, and I can name a few that will be more open to taking you in. So you may want to consider going in as a physiotherapist or along that line, then from there build your knowledge and then slowly cross over. I mean if I'm in one of those VWOs right now, I would love to have you on board because I'm going to get you as a occupational therapist, and you can see things from a different perspective. So I would say go in as an occupational therapist now, for now, and then go and build your knowledge and then slowly look within the organization if you could cross over, right? Yeah, I mean that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts. Yeah,
Fine. Okay,
sure.
just a final last simple question. How
Hmm.
are there any ways for the audience to contact you on LinkedIn to seek more advice after this session?
Oh, definitely, definitely. No worries about it. I mean, you could find me on LinkedIn, or you could just drop me an email to. Would you? Okay, I will just say it out. You maybe
You
somebody
can
could just take
type
it
it
as
in the discussion forum if it's
discussion forum. Okay, okay. I will just type it out in the discussion forum. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's my email address that I've put in the discussion forum, right? Yes. Anybody just feel free. I mean, if you need to have a quick chat with me, You just want, if you happen to drop by NIE, I don't know why would anybody want to drop to NIE. It's like really far. All right, it's like I always say it's Pulau NTU. We are away from everything else. Yeah, if you happen to drop by NIE, you want to catch up for coffee, yeah, please do. And we definitely can have more chat. I'm more than willing to share my little knowledge and my little experience in the field to help you guys. Especially, I mean, I would love to see all of you in a matter of time, hopefully to come on board the field. I think more the merrier. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bernard, for the great sharing and insights. We have come to the end of this session and thank you all for attending. You'll be provided with a short survey right after this session and we would love to hear some of your valuable feedbacks. Thank you once again for joining us and we hope you will enjoy the rest of the sessions today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.